Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of No Cap Room, a real No Cap Room, because I'm Jake Fisher, and I'm here reunited with my man, your man, everyone's man, Dan Devine. What's up?
Jake, I felt pangs of jealousy seeing you doing shows with all of our other colleagues, bringing in Chris Finch from the Minnesota Timberwolves. There are all these people out here talking to Jake, getting those hot Jakes, receiving the love and the vibe. And I'm, halfway, not even halfway, all the way across the country, not in Vegas. So seeing you, I'm glad that you were prospering out there in the desert and glad that you thrived in the environment. But I'm also glad to be back here with you.
I mean, look, you didn't show up to even like a Zoom in while I was on the road. While you were on the finals, just recall, I put on a suit and a bow tie at like 2 a.m. Eastern time. So who's the more committed person on this side of this relationship?
You're absolutely more committed. I was, when it was like, do you want to go to Summer League? I was like, absolutely not. that is makeup kids time after being gone for the finals. So my commitment was more in like getting kids ready for summer camp and not so much being at Summer League. But now we can reconvene just in time for the entire NBA world to go night-night.
I hope it goes night-night, but unfortunately, there's still a couple of trade scenarios hanging over the NBA, which we will get to first. And then we will also dive into some winners and losers of the NBA offseason, my favorite mechanism to discuss things. I just love telling people that they suck. That's just a joy of mine. But you know what? That's what the people want. That's what the bosses want. You wrote a really long, detailed column about
it. Always harping on how long the pieces are, not if they're any good.
I said very detailed. Yeah. A lot of information.
It's a euphemism for long.
Packing a lot of punches. I don't know. I wrote on Tuesday, we're recording this on our usual recording time, but it won't be our usual recording time for a while.
We'll get into that later.
We'll get into that later. We're recording this a little after noon Eastern time, Thursday, July 20th. Wednesday, my story
What are you doing? Did you just have a small stroke?
I'm trying to remember the days, man. I'm in total off-season mode. I'm in like, how many days do I have until I leave for vacation mode, which is 11. So,
okay. Today is Thursday.
I do know that. I said that. Today's Thursday. I was trying to remember
when you wrote
my story came out. Because like you write the story on Tuesday and then it publishes on Wednesday. There's like the whole thing. I was at lunch with someone on Wednesday, meeting an NBA person in New York. And then I got all the Real GM push notifications about my article regarding James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers. That's the long intro. Here we are. We're on the topic. We did it. It's just, I wouldn't have felt compelled to write on the subject. I don't think our bosses would have been kind of pushing me to put out something if Joel Embiid did not tell uninterrupted CEO Maverick Carter at Los Angeles Uninterrupted Film Festival thingy that he doesn't know where that's going to be in terms of winning a championship, whether it's in Philly or anyone else. And then Sixers GM, as he does, Daryl Morey, went onto local radio 97.5 FM, The Fanatic. Shout out my guy, Devon Givens. I mean, literally 2 years ago, Daryl went on 97.5 to talk about Ben Simmons' situation. I believe those were his first like real public comments on the radio there. That is the affiliate station of the team. That is where, if you want to listen to a Sixers game in your car, driving down 995 or the Schuylkill. I'm just dropping all my references to show I'm from the area.
But this is like, if you want to talk directly to the fans who are the most freaked out about what's going on right now, this is where you go to do it.
This is where you deliver your company line to the masses. So there was some stuff to like just kind of forward in advance because the main actors and characters involved spoke willingly and publicly. The Embiid stuff, I don't know what to believe in terms of like, it was a private event that then like the audio and the video came out 4 days ago, blah, blah, blah,
no
blah.
such thing. No such thing anymore.
That's go. That's exactly what I was going to take it. So take it away, Dan.
Well, Joel Embiid, setting aside the fact that Joel Embiid is maybe like, is one of our like great postmodern superstars. Like he fully understands that he is broadcasting and like living in public at all times. Like he's essentially a Twitch streamer, but just like with all aspects of his life. Even though he, so he keeps some aspects of that private, but like you are on a stage with a live microphone speaking at an event promoting like a media property. Like this is not something that's like around a dinner table with 4 friends. And he's incredibly smart and canny about these sorts of things and knows that, doesn't say anything by accident. So when you say, I just want to have a chance to win, whether that's in Philly or elsewhere or somewhere else, that you have to know, even if that's like a mistake in the moment or whatever, even if you didn't necessarily intend it to come out that way, you have to know it's going to go everywhere like wildfire as soon as those words fall out of your mouth.
It reminded me very like distinctly of when I went down to Philadelphia in December for a quick like day reporting trip to do a story on Shake Milton. And I asked the Sixers, I said, I am a fan of Shake's story and what he at the time he was like stepping up for Maxey when Harden was out too, and he was like really kind of keeping the like playoff ship afloat. And I was down to write about him, but also like I wanted to talk to Joel about him because he was the most consistent teammate. And like when you're going to Philly for a story, like you're going to ask for Joel Embiid.
Yeah, you're there, might as well ask, right?
Yeah. So I ended up getting like 20 minutes with him, and we talked about Shake for a little bit. And then like when one of the most affable superstars of the day's game is like willing to just shoot the shit, like I kept going. So when he said to me, Sixers fans wanted to trade him, like that comment it's swirled like wildfire. It's not to say I did anything amazing to elicit him. He just said it.
Right.
And it's dominated local radio there. It was a national talking point for like a week. Not a week, but definitely like a couple of days. Because it was December and it was the start of trade season. And Joel Embiid says Sixers, like he knows he's been in that ring before. He's been in that eye of the hurricane of the rumor mill by something he has said with the word trade in it. So to your point, and it's like a week has gone by already. So the fact that we're continuing to discuss it is like another thing. But the reason why it's important, it's hanging over this Harden stuff. Like,
right.
This guy's about to turn 30. I know that because Joel's like 2 weeks older than me. Starting a 4-year contract extension that has a player option in year 4, so a 3+1. But 30 is like that magic number in the NBA where if it came up with Dame, it came up with Steph, it came up with LeBron however many years ago, which is kind of a silly joke now, which, the primes of these guys' careers continue to extend deeper and deeper into their 30s. But Harden's now on a 1-year deal. Who the hell knows how that will ultimately unfold? The fact that Joel is saying that now, while that situation is hanging over this team, is the story. That was what I really wanted to write. And we can pivot a little bit to the Harden Clippers thing here. But Dan, for someone who's been an MVP voter, who is caring about chronicling the true stakes of what it's like when a superstar is at the mountaintop and how they end up planting a flag up there or falling off without leaving their mark at all. Like, am I wrong to be, because the Sixers will tell you, oh, he's just, he's trolling. Right. He wants to be here. Daryl and Joel talked after those comments and they're on the same page and they've never been more in lockstep. And with Nick Nurse, they're excited about what they can do if James Harden comes back. James Harden doesn't want to come back. And how they land that plane, to me, is just like very, very critical to the latter half of whatever is left of Joel Embiid's prime. This is the reigning MVP of the NBA.
Yeah, and that's why, the Harden situation has only ever interested me insofar as what it means for Embiid, essentially. Because I'm maybe lower than the national nerd consensus on the whole Clippers experiment. I think at this point, like that is I will believe it when I see it for me every single time. And I understand.
You wanted me to put them down as a loser on our winners and losers section. That's coming up.
That wasn't me. Although I will say, I mean, you can argue that like the Clippers kind of haven't done very much, and they are in this holding pattern while also having like two separate swords of Damocles hanging over their heads in the extensions for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, with their respective health situations. Whatever you could argue, like other teams are rising and they're just kind of staying still, and relative positioning wise, that means you're falling back anyway. So like Harden on the Clippers, fine, sure, maybe. I mean, better, maybe, who knows? The part that matters to me about that is if the Sixers are moving off, and when we had the initial conversation about this, I was like, if the Sixers are moving him, they have to return at least as much commensurate value now, because they are built to win now. The window is the extension that they signed Joel Embiid to. They're not like, and Daryl Morey essentially said as much in this, and you call back to the Ben Simmons radio interview and the way that discussion is sort of all unfolded. Like, it has to be about what makes us more competitive for a title today, because we have Joel Embiid today, and we have this version of him that is more or less healthy and has been more or less healthy for the last several years. We have that today. So like the process was, the whole goal of it was to get that guy that can be that standard bearer for your organization. And whatever, you needed all the bites at the apples to find this guy, and you have him. So now everything has to be about, in the same way that like Golden State had to eventually just trash the 2 timelines plan because you got the guy. You have to do everything.
There was never a 2 timelines plan. What are you talking about?
Of course, yeah. There wasn't a James Wiseman and Jordan Poole and Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga youth movement that was going to lead them into tomorrow. And then 2 more teenagers drafted last year. No one ever thought about that as a parallel track. Joe Lacob wasn't publicly saying that. Anyway, when you have everything has to be oriented around, making us the most competitive team we can be today, and then also keeping that guy happy to maintain this as long as we can maintain it. And so I can't, I won't presume to know like to what degree Joel is tweaking everybody, to what degree it's like kidding on the square, like when you say a joke, but it's really what you actually think, or, the percentages of parsing out his commentary. I don't know. But what I do know is you don't say something like that by accident. Everything the organization has to do has to be in service of, in the same way that like the Bucks had no choice but to re-sign those guys, because you need to show Giannis you're serious for as long as you need to, and which is every day. You have to prove it every day to your superstar at that level, because if you don't, and if that guy decides he actually does want out, that's the one where like every team that has every pick and every pick swap and every young guy and whatever else, that's the guy they go after. You don't Harden, and maybe that's the differential in terms of Harden discussion. Like James Harden was that guy. He's not that guy anymore. Joel Embiid is that guy now. And there are a vanishingly small number of players who are that at that level, where you throw everything you possibly could in the ring for them if you get the opportunity. And Embiid is that. And Morey knows it. And so that's why I think James Harden didn't get a multi-year deal to go into the future. And Joel Embiid is, Daryl is going to the radio immediately to say we're in lockstep, and he was just tweaking everybody, and we're going to do everything we have to do like the baton has been passed somewhat in terms of who Daryl knows he has to keep happy in that way, and James ain't that guy anymore, which is I think why James says he wants out. That would be my guess.
They've also, his side has maintained. I feel like we're just going over the same talking points, but it is what it is. The Sixers side, they obviously got dinged by tampering investigation findings from the league, 2 second-round picks. The Sixers have also made it clear in my conversations with them that like if the league found tampering, violations, whatever, with Daniel House and PJ Tucker, but nothing with James Harden, then they didn't find any alleged like wink, wink, we're going to give you this 4-year deal coming down the pipeline after a pay cut for James Harden. The league found no wrongdoing with their Harden pay cut. They found wrongdoing with the PJ Tucker, Daniel House early contact, which they're connected, and some like the numbers match pretty perfectly. So I don't necessarily know how they're not connected, but like the Sixers have made it very clear that there was never any type of handshake, wink, wink. And if it was, the league would have found it. That's what they have communicated to yours truly. So they also have made it very clear that they were not willing to talk to Harden before the bell on 6 p.m. June 30th because they didn't want to lose more picks and get more hamstringing and handcuffing and making this a more difficult puzzle to solve. Harden apparently, because Harden's opt-in date was the day before, Harden apparently and his people were miffed and offended by the fact that the Sixers at least didn't even give them the indication that they would be willing to pay them the long-term money that Harden has been looking for, especially after taking a pay cut last season. And that in itself, the fact that Philly wasn't just signaling that at a bare minimum, they believe that the Sixers, dating back to last year, have never really had the intention of paying James Harden the money that he wants. So he opted in because, from what I've heard, him and his representation looked at the Clippers, looked at them looking for point guards with Fred VanVleet back at the trade deadline, nearly trading for Malcolm Brogdon before the draft, and that what better point guard to add into this all or nothing, basically superstar tandem of Kawhi and Paul George than an LA native who is a former MVP in his own right, who wants to be there for sure, not just someone who's getting traded there from a team that wants to make a deal, like getting Kristaps Porzingis in Boston, and the fact that the Clippers have draft capital to spend, a lot of matching contracts. I mean, the Clippers, from my estimation, from talking to cap guys around the league, are like the best positioned team to aggregate salary for someone of 36 million to 40 million type money like James Harden makes. It's not to say the Sixers see that package as something appealing to them, though.
Right.
So to me, the newsiest item of my story that definitely got taken and aggregated and taken out of context by many an account that I gave Philly a heads up from before I even published it, because I thought it'd be something to that degree, was the fact that at this point, if he's not traded, Harden does plan to report to camp, and I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, it's July 20th. I mean, what does any of this mean? What he's going to do in October right now? But they are at least prepared for that scenario, and he's done it before. He has made a stink in Houston. He's made a stink in Brooklyn. And I don't think that he's just going to hold out. I mean, I could hear something and be told something over the next 2 months that'll make me change my mind. But from everything I've heard, they're not just going to report and be like, oh, shucks, we're here, let's play. Right. They're going to report, and it's not going to exactly be a harmonious situation. So I saw a lot of Sixers fans and other people say to my story, well, if he opted in with the idea of going to the Clippers, why didn't he just opt out and sign there? Well, it's not so simple. A sign and trade hard caps teams, and there was only one real way to guarantee he was going to be getting that type of money, just like Kyrie a year ago opting in instead of taking the mid-level with the Lakers. So I don't know. I said enough, Dan. Just any reaction, anything, any ball I dropped that you want to take and advance a couple more yards down the field here? What say you?
Yeah, I think there are clear parallels and points of comparison between this and the Dame Portland Miami situation, where it's if everybody was happy, if everybody liked the deal on the table, the deal would have got done already, right? So yes, there's a lot of different. 20th. Yeah,
it's been 3 weeks.
There's a lot of ways that the Clippers can get to matching salary. If Daryl Morey liked that collection of players, would mix and match and to find whatever you bring back. If he thought that help the Sixers be have at least the same level of championship potential, he would have done it already. So he doesn't see, if the Clippers are not, as you had reported, they don't seem inclined to move off of Terrence Mann. If they're not doing that, and it's all right, I mean, how much is Marcus Morris and Norman Powell and whatever, a pick or something, how much is that doing for you? And if you can't reroute those things for more stuff, as the Heat are trying to figure out how to do with here, all that kind of all of this requires some other thing to move things along, maybe, and whether that's public statements or showing up in the proverbial fat suit, it remains to be seen. But
it also, not to keep interrupting, it also could just be some team calling Philly tomorrow and saying, hey, you know what, here's this, and then being like, oh, okay, we'll take it. That could happen too.
Here's my thing. I don't think that's happening because I don't think that there's you look around the league, look at the teams that have point guards, look at the teams that have an opening or would need something or might view themselves as like a star level player away from something, entering a new stratosphere of contention. I don't think they're out there. I think Harden wants to go to LA. Maybe it's because it's a homecoming thing. Maybe it's because he looks at that and says, that would be a good spot for me. We know, as you were saying, we know they've been looking for point guards, yada, yada, yada. I think it might also just be like the last port in the storm. I think that people look at what James Harden has been, and I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, and it's like there are all the positives and upsides of what he was, were leading the league in assists, helping Joel Embiid to reach the MVP, one of the most effective and efficient two-man games in the league, yada, yada, yada. You are paying for a 33-year-old guy who collapses in the playoffs almost every year. Yes, he's capable of also having huge games like the 40, going for 40 twice in the other second round against Boston. But those are, at this point, those are the outliers as opposed to the games where he is 4 for 16 and doesn't get a shot off in the paint and can't get to the line anymore. Like that's, the rest of the league has seen that too. So when you say, I think Harden is bummed out or was disappointed or frustrated that, no, it didn't seem like the Sixers had any intention of meeting the price that he believes he's worth. I think the rest of the league also doesn't want to pay that price for James Harden. I think even opting in on this deal now for most of the rest of the league would be like, I don't know, 36 and a half for what, And so we reach an interesting sort of question about market value. And I think James Harden thinks his market value is higher than the market thinks James Harden's market value is right now. And I don't blame, we get to this place with superstars and stars all the time where I'm not saying he's about to go become a sixth man and be traded for 4 teams in 3 years like, Russ was or whatever. But, the superstars who see themselves one way and then the league sees them the other way, it's hard to kind of meet in the middle for those sorts of players. So, that's my main thought about that is I think that what we are seeing is like a manifestation and outgrowth of James Harden, an identity crisis that he's not yet reconciled in terms of the way where he is in the league now and the way the league sees him now. And we'll find out how that resolves. But I think it's what's making it hard for Morey to get the price he wants and for Harden to get the money and the destination that he wants, because all NBA first team guys get that. Maybe all NBA fringe all NBA third team guys don't get that. And that difference is a huge difference. The only other ball that was not even a drop ball, but like other thing I want to say, the thing that stuck out outside of the main thing that Joel said in the uninterrupted interview, which, the in Philly or anywhere else, is the next line, quote, "I just want to have a chance to accomplish that." Dog, you were up 3-2 in the second round, up 10 points in the second half, in the fourth quarter of that game, right? And then Joel Embiid didn't have a very good ending of game 6 and game 7, and they lost that series. I voted for Joel Embiid for MVP. I sleep fine about that. I feel okay about it. I've voted him, I think, second or third in MVP the previous couple of years. I think he's phenomenal. Super huge fan of his game. I've written glowingly about him multiple times. That's the chance, right? You get to the second round of the playoffs. You are, up on your hated rival that has vanquished you so many times and not ended your seasons early. When you're the guy, that's when you put the hammer down. And not to be, Joe Sixpack Sports Talk Radio guy about it, but he has a chance here. Whether it continues to be the case, we'll see what happens with Harden, what they turn into, and Tyrese Maxey making the leap, and what Morey can do with the rest of the roster and whatever. But he has this. This is it. He has it. Maybe a better one will come up elsewhere, but acting like this wasn't one that you were at least partially responsible for it disappearing, I think that's a tough look. And it goes back to the thing of you can't get all the credit and none of the blame ever, for everything. It's got to be that heavy is the head that wears the crown. It's that kind of thing. So Joel Embiid deserves to have a championship caliber team put around him. He's a talent at that level. Joel Embiid also has to elevate that team if it's close, but there's that sort of margin that has to get bumped up. And I think we haven't seen that part yet.
Last thing I want to say about Philly before we take our quick ad break, very quickly, just because I was listening to our friends at the Rights to Ricky Sanchez this morning while I
Say
was
the name.
doing
Congratulations
errands.
on 10 years. 10 years of making that show and making themselves insane in the process.
10 years ago, I was an intern at Slam Magazine and I was covering the draft. And I remember listening to the Ricky reaction while waiting for the subway back to the apartment that my then girlfriend, not the current girlfriend, was renting for her own summer internship, and just realizing how wild of a moment of history the Sixers were about to enter into as that all was happening.
Which draft was that? Who did they get?
That was the Nerlens Noel trade for Drew Holiday, yes, 2013. Right. Sam Hinkie starts the process as Danny Ainge trades Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce to Brooklyn, which you can read all about in a wonderful book that someone wrote. So
that was a busy night. Yeah.
I just want to say, because I think it got a little bit like blown out of proportion when I wrote it a week or two ago. Just the Tyrese Halliburton was on the table for the Sixers thing. I just want to say, and like we have space to talk. I just want to say, I don't ever think that the Kings made a tangible, like, this is our best offer for Ben Simmons with Tyrese Halliburton, and the Sixers turned it down. That is not what I've ever reported. I don't believe that to be true. But the fact that he got traded for Domantas Sabonis, that same exact trade deadline cycle, and the fact that I know, or I have been told from various conversations, that in the early stages when Philly was trying to trade Ben Simmons for James Harden, which was going on from the beginning, like Philadelphia made contact with Brooklyn from the very start, and James Harden was Daryl's guy. Obviously, he was I remember exactly where I was outside of this tattoo shop that gave me an awful tattoo in the fall of 2022, where I was talking to someone who used to work for the Rockets, who was telling me that don't believe anything I hear aside from the fact that Daryl is trying to turn Ben Simmons into James Harden alone. I don't think that was exactly a linear the situation, but they were trying to get James. And in that process, Philadelphia was trying to figure out 3-team scenarios, because at first the Nets were not really interested in taking Ben Simmons back until they realized Harden was going to walk in free agency that following summer, and Ben Simmons and 2 first-round picks was basically not a bad consolation prize. So in those talks, Philly was posturing at least to Brooklyn that they could find a way to get Tyrese Halliburton and send him to Brooklyn instead of Ben Simmons. So his name was coming out of Philadelphia people's mouths, to my knowledge, in early talks with Brooklyn, to the point where the Sixers, and I just, from talking to other teams too, other teams were at least of the mind that the Sixers thought that Tyrese Halliburton was someone that could be in play in 3-team scenarios with Ben. I'm not saying, never have said that Monty McNair and the Kings called up Daryl Morey and the Sixers and said, hey, we want to trade Tyrese Halliburton for Ben Simmons, and Philly said no. All I'm saying is he was definitely involved in conversations and seemed like someone that was very much in play to be a return for Ben in some capacity for some team if he was heading out the door, before ultimately we got to the James Harden blockbuster of February 22 and the deal zone and all that jazz. So that's all I wanted to say. Dan.
Was the terrible tattoo that you got the, like, don't believe Daryl Morey, he only wants to get James Harden for Ben Simmons? Like, I'm thinking about like Memento, and you just having like tattoos that are like, don't believe his lies, his name is Ben S, you know, like all sort of all down around your body. I'm imagining that's what you wound up getting the tattoos of.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. And then I stare in the mirror while I'm chain smoking during every single transaction cycle, trying not to get confused by what's true and what's false. I can remember past mistakes along the way. So we are going to take a quick break. Enough Philly talk, enough Sixers talk, enough James Harden talk. I don't want to talk about them again until something actually happens. And we're going to do some winners and losers, which I don't want to do either, but we're going to do it. We're going to do it. That's what the people want. And we're going to give
energy.
It to them. Stay tuned. Welcome back to No Cap Room here on the Ball Don't Lie podcast network. Of course, I'm with Dan Devine. Dan, your winner that you put down is the Phoenix
I thought you
Suns.
said, Dan, you're a winner. I was like, oh, Jake, thank you,
You are
buddy.
a winner. You
That's
are
so
a winner.
nice.
When I was on the streets of Las Vegas and people were coming up to me and saying, hey, how's Yahoo going? They were like, man, you guys have a great team. You got Dan Devine. And then the list stopped. Everyone just talks about how great you are. No, I'm just kidding.
Everybody dunking relentlessly windmills on Ben and Vinny and Kristen and everybody. It's like, oof.
No, I'm just kidding. People they were singing your praises as always. So
That's very kind.
you are
Thanks
a
to everybody who
You
was
are
nice.
A winner.
Thanks to everybody who was nice when I wasn't there in Las Vegas and who said no when they saw me in Denver and in Miami. Nothing for me. No praise, no plaudits, no nothing. But when I'm not around, you tell Jake nice things. Appreciate that, guys. Thanks.
The other thing I'll tell you. I think 2 years ago at Summer League was the first time people started like coming up to me on the concourse. And you know, it is always nice when I go to like a bar or we just went to a wedding with lady friends peoples, and I met a bunch of her college friends, and one guy was like, oh,
Lady Friends Peoples is her name now. We're going to call her Lady Friends Peoples on the podcast. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And one guy was like, oh, I didn't realize like you're the Jake Fisher I follow on Twitter. I was like, yeah. I've been surprised pleasantly surprised how many people have said, I love the pod.
That's
and
cool. That's
a lot of people, not to say I don't think that we're doing something good here, but I don't think of myself as a podcaster. I'm a writer, reporter by trade.
Sure.
So the public saying how much they like the pod, and a lot of people in the industry who were saying nice things about you were saying, yeah, I mean, you and Dan together, like what a good combo. I was like, oh, thanks.
That's very sweet.
Very
so
sweet,
let's shut all those people up by doing a boring winners and losers segment, Jake. Let's freaking do it.
But again, we're using just like the main characters of the next season that we did with Vinny Goodwill in Vegas. We're just using this as a mechanism to be a conversation, you know?
Yes.
So a lot to unpack with Phoenix. They are your winner. Why? Are they just because of the Bradley Beal trade? What say you?
Yeah, I think if nothing else, it's like this is a full bore going for it situation, right? Like that team had reached a point like midway through last season where it felt like whatever was working has gone stale, right? Like there was the sort of continual burbling of the Ayton Monty Williams, clash or grind, disgruntlement in, multiple directions. There was, Booker had been amazing, but then he got hurt. And then it became very clear, like Chris Paul couldn't be a second star in that same way anymore. Like the offense was just not popping at all when Booker was hurt. They lost a ton of games in a row. They were under 500 in like beginning of February, I think, or like mid-January. It was just like something was missing. And it was like the math that we had, or the sort of the combination of elements that got us to the finals and then got us 64 wins, and we were feeling good going into last playoffs. It had the like carbonation had kind of fizzled. Like there wasn't any more. It felt flat, and so now whether different is better, we'll see. But I think it's reasonable to look at it and say we can buy that Bradley Beal is a better source of complementary offense in those minutes when like Booker's hurt or Durant's off the floor. I mean, obviously it all starts with getting Durant, but it's Durant, and they were insane with Durant and Booker on the floor. They were the only team that really put a scratch on Denver with that, that tandem in the playoffs. And you add Beal to that. Yes, it's more unconventional because you don't have a straight point guard, but you have multiple ball handlers that have much more firepower and are also like nobody's an A+ playmaker, but they're all like B- to B+. And Booker, I think, might even be better than that. He has reached a new level with that. So you go and you find the area that was your weak point, and you say, well, we're going to try to strengthen that with a guy who, even if it's somewhat duplicative in terms of a talent set, like you still need more guys that can create shots. They need more rim pressure. They needed somebody else that can sort of shoulder that creative burden if Booker is not available or if Durant, whatever, just to ease those guys' loads. And I think that Bradley Beal's a good target for that. And then super creative and super successful getting like real players who are not just like, it's not the Lakers 2 years ago signing like 35 to 38-year-old minimum salary guys and hoping that it'll work out. They're signing like guys who are productive NBA players now. You bring back Josh Okogie, you bring back Damian Lee, you go get Eric Gordon, you go get Keita Bates-Diop, you go get Yuta Watanabe, and like you're adding stuff. It's not, I mean, yeah, they're all to some degree scratch tickets because that's what minimum salary contracts are. But I think they did a really good job of building out a roster that's going to be, I think they can play huge. They're going to be, which I think is going to help them defensively. They're going to be length. Like if Beal is your point guard, essentially, it's like 6'4", 6'5", 6'8", 6'9", 6. Like they're going to be big across all across the floor, and I think that's going to help them. I like what they did, and I like that it's a big swing. I also like the. I mean, while the moving off of campaign was essentially a salary dump to chop down the luxury tax bill.
It was a salary dump, yeah.
Yeah, which runs counter to the, Matt Ishbia will, blow through the second apron and spare no expense. But maybe that puts them in position to, like, they have, I think, a $6.5 million trade exception. They've been able to, like, through the further financialization and arbitrage of their pick swaps, generate, like, I think a half dozen second rounders kind of out of nowhere that you can, like, attach to somebody to bring into that salary slot, into the trade exception. So they might not be done. They still might be able to add another player or two in those situations, which will then bump the salary, bump the tax bill up again. But like this might have been a preparing for that. I don't know. I think that they put themselves in position to be different and to be like an overwhelming offense with an argument for how it could be better on defense, especially given Frank Vogel all those tools to be able to like when last we saw Frank Vogel with a full complement of like wings who could play, he built a championship defense, and I think that's a pretty good upside bet here in Phoenix.
If the cap accounting ever gets wonky, Ish Wainwright's deal is non-guaranteed, so he'd be the player I would be looking at as like the guy that would be dropped in a sense, just like how Campaign was the guy. Like Bol was the Suns' last target, and they needed to move Campaign to make that happen. That was pretty clear. Yeah. I think the bosses will be happy that I say this because we can cut this clip and it can have a wide reach. I mean, I wrote it the night that free agency opened, and I'm still sitting here thinking it now, especially realizing at my lunch with people yesterday, I realized that Troy Brown and Taurean Prince basically just like traded spots with Minnesota and LA, and Taurean Prince got a little bit more money, but Troy Brown got above the minimum, and I'd much rather have Taurean Prince at $5 million than Troy Brown at a little bit above the minimum. And that's just like one microcosm of many moves that the Lakers have done dating back to the trade deadline that just they're in very good position to be one of the leading contenders in the West as long as everyone has, as long as they stay healthy.
Sure.
Asterisks. I think theirs might be a little more dire being that LeBron is your age. But
we both put about $1 million into our bodies every year, so that's good.
Yeah.
Mine is mostly in cold cuts. I put $1 million with the cold cut into this body every year.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to sit here and say Rob Pelinka reinvented the wheel and he's the second coming of Jesus Christ himself, but I think
that's cool. You shouldn't say that. That's good.
I think the Lakers have really found their groove and how to tweak and adjust this roster within the confines of the CBA around LeBron and Anthony Davis. Now I'm not thinking too far ahead, but LeBron only has one guaranteed year left. He's starting a 2-year extension, but second year's player option. LeBron stuff's hanging out there. Now I just want to throw out a little pearl that because of how well the Lakers have conducted their business, by all accounts, they've drawn rave reviews around the league. I am curious to see what they end up doing or how they end up trying to pivot from this era. That's just something that I'm intrigued to see. I don't think they have any clue. But right now they've been so. That's not to say shame on the Lakers for not preparing for this, because like they're going to try to keep building and hoping that LeBron is LeBron for as long as he wants to be in LA. So it's just interesting to me that it now seems like they've got a pretty good grasp of things in arguably the best market to be recruiting free agents and wanting to do pre-agency stuff to trade for guys like Anthony Davis before the next guy. So they've done a lot that makes me bullish on how they could pivot from out of this era of Lakers basketball. And I'm really curious to see it. That's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the only guaranteed salaries they've got beyond 2 years from now. So like not 23, 24, but after 24, 25. Because like LeBron is on a player option for 24, 25. AD has an early termination. They might extend him this summer. We'll see about that. D'Angelo Russell also on a player option. Like the only longer term deals they've got right now are the ones they just signed. Rui, Austin Reeves, and Gabe Vincent. Those go through 25, 26. But like I think they're on the books for something like $50 million guaranteed to a couple years down the line. So they will have all the flexibility in the world to be able to pivot if they want to. And as you said, like they're going to get the meeting with pretty much anybody they want to. Or, I mean, I guess not that meetings happen in free agency anymore, but they'll. It's not like whatever it was when not D'Angelo Russell, LaMarcus Aldridge was like on, I will meet with this team at this time and like the Lakers couldn't get a meeting at that point or whatever. So it's not like that anymore, but they will have an audience with whoever they want to be able to get in the room, especially because, I mean, as we, you're talking about, Rob Pelinka might not be the second coming, but the Lakers themselves did find religion, professional writer, with respect to how they built this roster. They had a way it worked. Guys who can shoot and defend around LeBron and AD. Then they stopped doing that and they were bad. And now they were like, hey, what if we went back to the thing where we had guys who can shoot and defend around LeBron and AD, and they made the Western Conference Finals. So they doubled down on that this summer. I think you're absolutely right. That's a strong candidate for a team that is sort of on the uptick heading into next year.
A team that seems like they're trending downward right now is the Toronto Raptors. They are your loser. You seem a little distressed by just the mere mention of their names. So what's going on through your noggin?
Jake, I'm peeved. I'm cheesed. I'm stressed about it. I mean, at some point, something has to happen here, right? Like, I wrote about heading into...
Fred VanVleet walked and they got nothing back.
But then they also brought back Jakob Poeltl on the 4-year, $80 million deal, which I guess was maybe the cost of doing business from having given up a first-round pick for him at the trade deadline. But like, all right, so we give up a starter, we keep a starter, we bring in Dennis Schroeder and Jalen McDaniels as sort of stopgaps, and where are we? You're a worse version of a team that went 500 and didn't look all that good in the process. And you've provided no greater clarity for where you want to go with the Pascal Siakam situation, in what ways that connects to, or what it might mean, if anything, for OG Anunoby's set of circumstances. There's all this discussion about new head coach Darko Rajakovic sort of planning to put the ball in Scotty Barnes' hands more. All right, well, if you want to, maybe I had the idea of the way we're going to accomplish that is getting rid of letting Fred VanVleet go and then replacing him with nothing. Oh, sorry, Dennis Schroeder's not nothing, but essentially just transferring the bulk of that usage to Scotty Barnes feels like a no. That doesn't feel like the right move for a team that was already bad on offense. So I look at that and I'm like, and maybe it's more of an incomplete than a loser. I think Mark Stein had reported or at least written something to the effect of you get the sense coming out of Vegas that there's another move coming for them, or maybe I think Mark said maybe multiple moves coming for them. TBD. We'll see about that. But if nothing else, it feels like there needs to be, and yet they don't seem to feel the need to make them. And it's I have argued in the past. I think I wrote when I was at the Ringer, the idea of not trading Kyle Lowry at that deadline. I understood from an asset perspective why that was a bad idea, but for somebody who was the greatest Raptor of all time and somebody that your fan base has this emotional connection to, you're not getting nothing by keeping him around. You're, giving the opportunity to send off this franchise legend, and you recognize your saints and the guys who helped you along the way. But if you are going to sort of take that tack and maybe be a little bit too precious about all of the guys you really like, Masai Ujiri, then eventually you are just going to stand pat long enough that you're just standing still. And that feels like where they are right now. And for a team that I thought I was really high on heading into last season and thinking they could be a really interesting team for years and years to come, by midway through last season, I was like, these guys are boring. It's not fun to watch. There's no juice to this team. And then they just lost maybe their second best player for nothing. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would love to talk to, and maybe that's something that, over the course of the summer and as we go forward, I'll try to get a better sense from on the ground in Toronto, what is the argument? What's the upside argument for what they've done? Because I don't know if you have any ideas on it, because I don't see it.
No, and I think, depending on what happens with Pascal, there's just also a sense around the league that the Raptors have maybe even wasted a lot of teams' times over the last couple of transaction cycles, like engaging in these trade talks and kind of setting these high prices and never really having the intention of moving these guys anyway. That like it's a fixed marketplace, man. If you burn some bridges, I'm not to say that like that's definitively what happened, but it was a pretty common theme, I think, on the ground in Vegas from people working in front offices, kind of saying like, what are they doing? And people think maybe the Raptors don't think that they're smarter than everyone else. Maybe the Raptors don't think they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, but they've given that impression to teams. And that just doesn't seem like a great way to do business when you're going to have to come back around and work with those same people again. So I don't know. It's to your point about like, they're just kind of staying in place would even be like a bad outcome. That's the tough situation in Chicago right now too. Like my Bulls are
Jake's Bulls.
The breaks have gotten, they've just all broken the wrong way. That little glimmer, that little snapshot of Lonzo healthy. They started like 8-1 or whatever it was that year. And, you know, they've already said do not intend for him to play next season as he recovers from ongoing knee stuff. They give Nikola Vucevic a 3-year, $60 million deal that no one else was going to be giving him. That didn't exactly draw strong praise from people around the NBA. And they're just kind of dangling Ayo Dosunmu out there in restricted free agency very quietly. That's kind of gone under the radar. That 2 years ago, the Larry Markkinen RFA, where they basically held the guy hostage and demanded that a team basically traded 2 second-round picks to acquire him because they needed to both not send Chicago salary, so they needed to incentivize the third team to take on salary, and then also incentivize Chicago for letting him go to that team. They could just get Ayo back on the qualifying offer, which like doesn't help Chicago. I don't know. I don't think they're in any much worse of a spot than they were in entering this. I mean, but Toronto and Chicago were the two teams at the trade deadline that everyone was like, well, one of those teams has to do something. Right. And neither team
not so fast, my friends. Yeah.
I mean, I don't say it's for a lack of trying, but like the Zach LaVine stuff, I know Fred Katz just put it out in The Athletic today that the Knicks felt that the Bulls' asking price for him for LaVine was way too high. Like that's what I've been hearing and been writing and reporting too. Like they value Zach LaVine far above any return that Bradley Beal got for Washington. So I just don't know if that's out there. Like, I don't know. At a certain point,
that's sort of that. I mean, the sunny or the silver lining, the sunny side glass half full kind of argument for Chicago is Zach LaVine was coming off of knee injuries and stuff, and the beginning of last season did not look great, and then was like fantastic the second half of last season. And when we were talking however many episodes ago, but there was that sort of Beal LaVine dichotomy or sort of tandem comparison, and I think I had like mentioned some of the great numbers that LaVine had put up, and then said like, but he's sort of a sub Beal player or like a plan B kind of player. And I got some pushback from Bulls fans that were like, what is LaVine not better than Beal at right now? And honestly, it's a fair argument. Like he is, if the player that he was the second half of last year and that he's been, when healthy in the previous couple of seasons, that is a guy to build around for sure. I think the question though is just like, what are you building around him? And this is it's the sunk cost a little bit of like the roster construction you locked into when you made the trade for DeRozan, when you brought in Nik Vucevic, when you signed Lonzo at the sign and trade. Like this is the construction, and the hope was those guys are going to be like all-star players, and then your young guys are going to pop. 1 or 2 of your young guys are going to pop. And Kobe White it's been up and down, but has gotten better. They bring him back 3 years, $36 million. Pat Williams, everybody's waiting, and we haven't seen it. And some of that was injuries. Some of that was role inconsistency. Some of that was, lack of confidence in his jumper. Some of it might be he's maybe more like Marvin Williams than he is a superstar, right? And like that guy can play 15 years in the league, but he might only give you 10 and 5. And, we'll see. It's remains to be seen. But like that gap between that kind of wing and like Kawhi is a sizable gap, right? And for sometimes for these things to go right, you need that like spark of genius leap that we just haven't seen there. So yeah, It's less that they are. I can see the argument of more of them being like it's like a spinning your wheels kind of loser in this construct. But I think the hope would have to be like you get a full healthy LaVine season. You get DeMar's going to give you what DeMar gives you. Vooch, the shooting perks up a little bit more, and so you find that one of those young guys pops, and like that it's the same set of circumstances, but not a whole lot of like new excitement for sure.
Patrick Williams popping this year is going to be a huge element. If whether he does or whether he doesn't is going to be like the thing with the Bulls this season. All right, we've got 2 wildcard teams listed. We each picked one. Let's try to keep it moving. I'm just going to say, Dan, why is Boston your wildcard of the 2023 NBA offseason?
Well, all right. So when I was doing my, interminable writing that you can't get through, I was like, I got to write about the Celtics because they made a big pivot and a big sort of change in the way that they were approaching things. And I'm just like, I'm not sure about it. I can see the argument for why it makes them a winner. I can see an argument for why it makes them a loser, and I'm not sure. So that's why they're kind of like where I am with it is essentially moving Marcus Smart for Kristaps Porzingis. I get the in theory reasons for a lot of it, and where it adds more variety to your offense. It gives you some insurance for both Al Horford and Robert Williams III. There are relatively few players in the league that combine floor spacing and shot blocking at the level that Porzingis did last year. It gives you a different way to attack defenses when if you face switches or you can beat up a mismatch on the interior. I get that. And it also further opens up your 5-out offense, which is something that Joe Mazzulla really it's space it out and bomb away. That's the way Joe Mazzulla wants to play. I get that. The moving away from Marcus Smart to me just as like a cultural thing. We've talked about that. I feel like maybe I'm overrating whatever intangibles come with that, or the fact that he is like the switchable player that you can trust to guard anybody on a roster and gives you more versatility in the way you can game plan in a playoff series. Grant Williams has proven to be a pretty divisive player, certainly among Celtics fans many of whom responded to the winners and losers column by being like, if you think losing Grant Williams is a big deal, you are not paying attention to the Celtics. Like, he was not good last year. He was not one of their best defenders. He's not one of their most versatile defenders. He is essentially a replacement level big that they let go, and O'Shea Brissett's going to do 90% of that job with no problem. And maybe I'm overestimating Grant Williams. I don't know. It's possible. So I come to them like, to me, it feels like you gave up guys who can switch and do a bunch of different things for guys who do a couple of things real well. But that's like, now that's what you are. You are we're going to shoot a bunch of threes. We're going to play drop coverage. And that's kind of it sort of team. And maybe you're good enough to make that work. Like, maybe you can outshoot whatever other teams do. Maybe you can, Porzingis's post up and switch numbers from last year carry over again, as opposed to being outliers. Like, maybe. I just feel like there's going to be a point where we're in like the middle of May and you're in a dogfight, and it's like, I'm relying on Kristaps Porzingis and Malcolm Brogdon, and like, I don't know, like, we've been here before and had a certain way that we sort of did things, and now like the spark of that is gone. And maybe that doesn't really matter as much as the talent, but I'm not sure about it.
On the flip side of that trade, Memphis getting Marcus Smart, the Grizzlies are my wildcard team because they've been one of those teams that front office folks have said, they're a wildcard. They got all these picks. They could go do something for it. They could go trade for this guy or that guy. They made the offer for Mikal Bridges. I reported the Franz Wagner stuff. I think they might have even called other players. They were just trying. They're throwing picks around. Ended up using 2 for Marcus Smart, which, for everything you just saying, Boston's losing. They're obviously gaining.
Right.
And especially while John Morant is going to be out for 25 games. So I'm looking at Memphis because the Grizzlies and the vibe around Memphis for the last couple years as they have ascended has been, let's just not screw this up. Like, let's not do anything too brash. Let's not do anything too reactive. We drafted a strong core. We've got some other fun young guys that maybe will get some shots this year, like Kenny Lofton and David Roddy and Jake LaRavi are just bullying dudes out in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
They should be bullying dudes out in Vegas. They're all like 6'8" and huge compared to, and have been in the NBA for a year. But it was interesting to see that type of like, well, we lost Dillon Brooks. We've got a whole slew of just beefy wings who can make plays with the ball and maybe are even better shooters than Dillon Brooks. Not to say that they might all be as good defensively, but they've got at least in-house options, plus John Conchar, plus Santi Aldama's getting reps up in the new MBPA training facility that they built in Spain. That I saw a video of Davis Bertans is getting up shots there too. They're just also, they've never gotten out of the second round, just like our friends in Philadelphia.
Right.
And I do wonder for all, it may be like Dillon Brooks exiting stage left will help, and they'll like, a lot of teams around the league just like don't like Memphis. They thought they were maybe a little too big for their britches, and they barked a lot louder than they bit. We're starting to get close to wondering whether or not that is fact or fiction. Now, Denver would be the best argument possible of like, man, give this thing some time. John Morant's only going into his 5th year. Desmond Bane's only going into his 4th year. Jaren Jackson's going into his 6th. Like, it takes players usually like to get to 28, 29 to be able to, and like a couple of playoff rounds. I mean, Kevin Durant never won a title until he left and joined Golden State when he was deep into his career. Like, patience will be a virtue completely here. There's no need to apply. I'm not trying to apply any external pressure and light a fire under anything happening in Memphis. I'm just saying the fact that the expectations are so high. This is a team that is so homegrown and organically built, but they expect to be able to tango with the Titans of this Western Conference that has done it very glitz and glamourly like the Lakers have and like Phoenix has. They're just a very unique character to me in the Western Conference hierarchy, in that like Denver doesn't seem to be going away. Denver's Denver. They're this big juggernaut that everyone now is giving their proper due. Like, Memphis could become the next Denver. They could. The cards are right there. But I wonder if they'll get the same opportunity. That's basically it.
Yeah, I think that you're going to learn how they respond to their like falling on their face in front of the entire NBA world, right? Like, this is the last, between whatever that was, like mid-January and like those 3 months. And then when they got drummed out by the Lakers, like, that was about as embarrassing a dismount from a season as a 50+ win team, like championship contender, has had. And like, because it, like, even like the Suns teams that got beat in like multiple got beat in the game 6s, like blown out in those deciding games, like they at least made it deeper into the playoffs. Like they got annihilated in the first round after talking all kinds of junk, after the Ja stuff, after Dillon Brooks, all of that, like, and then they just implode. And so how do you respond to that? I think, to your point about like the need time to grow, when I was writing about them in the offseason piece, I'm like, Marcus Smart has played about 1,400 more postseason minutes than Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. combined. Bang. So like, and then so one of those things is like, that's an indication of what Smart brings in terms of his experience level. It's also an indication of like, it is early for those guys, like they've been through some of those wars, but like, this is the arc, the bit by bit growth. And so I think you're absolutely right. And like, the deck is stacked against them. Going to be at least the start of the season. Like, Ja's not going to be there. Brandon Clark is going to be out for, most of, if not all of this season, likely rehabilitating his Achilles injury. You've got Steven Adams coming off of injury. Like, there is that question, as you said, there's a lot of wings that could fit in there, but who is going to get those minutes? How is this?
I do like the sneaky Derrick Rose point guard depth signing, though. That was, little Memphis College reunion. I like that.
Yeah, there's a vibes component to that. I talked to some people in Memphis in Memphis media that were like, that's essentially like, if there's somebody that Ja's gonna like maybe listen to, or that's gonna be in terms of yes, it gets everybody excited. It's gonna send jerseys flying off the shelves, but also maybe like a him and Smart
flying off the shelves. Maybe there'll be a rush of a couple.
What I was told was like, this is already a popular item. Like Grizzlies Rose 23 or Memphis Rose 23 is already a thing. But that like also somebody who can actually talk to Ja from the perspective of like, I've been at the absolute pinnacle and I've been, I've through some, and I've had difficult things on and off the court that I have done and been part of, and I've had to work through and move forward in my career and my life. So like maybe there's some synergy there. I don't know, but there's a lot to figure out. There's also a ton of talent on board. I think Smart was a great swing, but you're absolutely right. It's like you cashed in a few chips to do it, and now your optionality is a little bit impeded or impinged upon because now you've spent some of those assets, and now what are you going to do with it? Now with what you've got left over.
There you go. All right, that's going to do it for us on this week's episode of No Cap Room. Thanks to John Gennaro, as always, for doing all the things he does to make this show look and sound great. Follow us on Twitter or Threads at Jake L. Fisher, at Your Man Divine. Subscribe to Ball Don't Lie on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you're currently listening on, and leave us a 5-star review. That would be super, super great. You may have realized for the summer, Ball Don't Lie has already kind of slipped down to 1 episode per week. That is kind of the routine we're going to be doing. Vinny Goodwill will be back next week with another good word. We'll be back the week after that, although I will not be here. I'll be on a little vacay in the beginning of August until I go to the World Cup in Manila.
And now you listeners, you might be asking, but you just said No Cap Room is going to be continuing every other week, but Jake's going to be away. What's going to happen during those weeks that Jake's away? Well, friends, Dan Devine's going to be hosting those weeks. And what that's going to look like and sound like and feel like, we're going to find out together. But I think I just want to we can get you amped in advance for what that's going to be like. Me moving over into the big chair and seeing how comfortable it is where Jake sits. I'm going to go to Jake's apartment. Jake doesn't realize that yet. I'm going to be going at his apartment. And then we're gonna have somebody else come here. It'll be a whole thing, but we're gonna have fun with it.
The other thing is, I won't know that I've been officially approved for a credential for the World Cup until I'm already in Asia. So maybe
it's a high stakes trip.
Maybe I'll end up coming back because I don't get let in. Who's to say? We thank you guys for listening. We'd appreciate it if you do come back for next week's episode of The Good Word and whatever special stuff that Dan whips up while I'm away. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks. See ya.